Welcome back to another session. I hope you are well. In today's session, I bring to a close the series that we began about 7 sessions ago, in which I termed the seven deadly sins. But specifically, the theme had to do with success and the masculine burden of performance. Um, I tried for the past 6 or 7 sessions to explain how, by eliminating or removing obstacles from the way, or obstacles that are in your way, things that can self sabotage your success, it becomes much easier for you to achieve success. Just get the obstacles out of the way. Your journey should be much more pleasurable. In today's session, I will be talking about wrath. Wrath is it's an emotion. It's not the same as anger. It's distinguished from anger for a number of reasons. Let me start with the first, and this is an opinion of mine. Anger is natural. Wrath is unnatural. From the books of antiquities, we are told, be angry but sin not. Be angry but sin not. Anger is simply an emotion that necessitates a change of attention or the redirection of that emotion in the right direction. Anger is a messenger. Wrath is simply the execution of the message from the messenger. So when we position anger as an emotion, anger can remain as an emotion. Wrath is the extremeness of anger plus action. And what we've seen of a time immemorial, people who could not control their emotions, especially people who could not control their anger, always did things that they regretted. We can start from all the way back from as we can remember. We have stories, we have parables, we have analogies, we have, you might say, symbolisms of people who could not control their anger and whose wrath led them down a pathway that could have been avoided. Cain and Abel, one brother feeling very dissatisfied and angry with his other brother's success and taking it out to the extreme. Levi and Simeon, brothers, being very frustrated at how their sister was treated by other men and wiped out an entire city. We can even include Moses, getting so frustrated by the people he was supposed to lead. And we can come all the way down to today's times. If we look at most prisons, like for example in London, for example, you see a lot of knife crimes, people killing each other, young boys, stabbing each other, shooting each other, attacking each other. Why? They could not control their anger. And the action was taken to the extreme. And a life with so much promise and potential thrown away for a moment of uncontrolled anger. Now, one of the reasons I thought this would be an important conversation for success is a simple one. Success is predictable, just in the same way as failure. Failure is predictable. You follow a series of steps, you will get the outcome. Think about this. If I mix 2 parts of hydrogen with 1 part of oxygen, I get a compound, H2O. We call that water. If I change the compound composition and I mix 2 parts of hydrogen with 2 parts of oxygen, I get an odorless and a colorless compound, just like water, but there's a big difference. If I drank it, it would kill me. The reason being, it would be called hydrogen peroxide. A different compound, similar, but different compound. The composition of emotions, if uncontrolled and if mixed in the wrong way, combined with action, can create a poisonous, you might say, a poisonous part of our experience in life. Sometimes actions can be regretted, but the consequence of that action cannot be undone. For example, as a young man, one of the things you have is testosterone. You have ego, you have your testosterone, and you have your peer group. When you combine all of that, all of the biological changes that take place in a young man with the fact that you've had no regulation. And this is the key word of today's session. If there is something I want you to take, is the word regulate. If there has been no regulation over years, either because there's been an absent father or no father, or a feminine father or a weak father, who did not provide boundary setting, boundary enforcement, one. Number two, rough and tumble play to enable you play out and act out and regulate that anger. 3, proper socialization with other young people. 4, the absence of role models and mentors and other men in the community to guide you and to nurture you and to watch over you and to love on you and be kind to you and teach you how to be a man. 4, the absence of anyone to teach you about masculinity, manhood, and the male frame. If you had all those absent, then what you find is actually you've been feminized in your emotions. And most young men, and most men these days, especially modern men, are feminine in their emotions. And so we take to the extreme the emotions. I said something in the session that I did a while back. Emotions are the enemies and can be the enemy of a rational investor. Take away investor, put the person. Emotions, an uncontrolled anger or wrath can be and will always be the enemy of a rational person. The lack of control of your emotions is deadly. The ability to regulate your emotion has to be taught, and the teaching process is not just formal, it's also by observation and behaviors. I'll give you a good example. As a young man, I never saw my father express any form of extreme emotion, especially anger. Never saw him. From a very young age, I would go out with my father and his friends, and in the evenings he would take us just in the way you would go down to the pub and you sit outside or you sit inside and you would people. And I was always around other men, always from a young boy. My brothers were there with me, and I would see men interact, and I would see men negotiate and disagree vehemently sometimes. I would see detractors meet together and harsh out their disagreement. Very extreme sometimes. And as a young man, I was observing how one man can disagree very strongly with another man's position, but still control his emotions and control his actions. I never saw anyone raise hands or throw things at each other, though disagreeing. So as a result of that, I saw something that was useful. In hindsight, I was being prepared for life about how to negotiate and how sometimes when you've been done badly, not to explode with your emotions, not to move from the natural to the unnatural phase. My father did a number of jobs, I remember very clearly as a young man, for people, and never got paid in the manner and in the timing that he should have. And I never saw my father angry. The people who he did work for would come to the same place where he would normally go for a drink, and he would see them, and he wouldn't raise his voice, he wouldn't go into a fit of anger, he wouldn't have any uncontrolled emotion. He always stayed in a frame that was admirable, the masculine frame, the ability to control, the ability to stay stoic. You see, wrath and stoicism are like two opposite ends of a coin. Men who can remain stoic are very dangerous men because they're not predictable. Men who have uncontrolled emotions are very easy to take away. Let me give you a good example. In the Godfather movie, I think it was Sonny, the first son, had this. He had a wrathful spirit, very easily angered, very prone to take action, and the way he was eliminated by the opposite side was by taking advantage of an emotion that had been observed and setting a trap for him. The news came again. Your brother-in-law has put his hands on your sister. Without thinking, without getting himself ready, he jumps into his car, and it was simply a setup. He got killed. Why? Because people who have uncontrolled emotions and uncontrolled anger are easy to manipulate. You just know what button to press, and you know the reaction that they would give you, because the reactions are predictable. So I would say, as part of your success journey, one of the things you have to learn how to do is control your emotions, control your anger, and eliminate any form of wrath that you might have in you. I'm going to speak about two parts to this whole anger and wrath issue. Number one, we've all been dealt a hand in life, a set of cards. Some of you, especially you young men, feel. Some of you think. Some of you believe. Some of you even know that the hand you've been dealt perhaps could have been better. I wouldn't say it was not deserving, but could have been better. And there is an anger you have, a feeling that you're waving your hand against the heavens. And that anger, because it's a negative emotion, is putting you in a state of vibration that is negative. So you're operating from a place of ignorance. Now, ignorance would always create a sense of worry and doubt, no matter what you do. Worry and doubt will lead to fear. Fear will manifest itself through the body as anxiety. Anxiety, the way we deal with it as men, we suppress anxiety. That leads to depression. That leads to us starting to slow down, destruction and death and disease. That is the pathway for wrath and uncontrolled anger. Many of you are carrying a history of emotions. Some of it might be considered to be unresolved psychological and cognitive behavioral issues. You've refused to see a therapist or a mentor. You've refused to see a coach or counselor. And so you've been carrying on this anger, so much so that some people will classify you as having anger management issues. Well, number one, you cannot manage anger. You only have to let anger flow. It's an emotion. But you have to learn how to regulate it, which is to know when you've gone from A to B to C to D. Most of you can go from A to Z in an instant. And what that simply means that amongst men who are successful, who observe you, they simply say, well, in another life, he would be a great kid to help. But I don't want him around my business because I don't like being around him. His inability to control his emotion and his volatility and his unpredictability is a liability. And therefore, whilst that can do good for him and by him, and whilst that can help him, and whilst that can mentor him, I do not trust his emotions. Most of you are carrying a wrathful experience, a traumatic experience from the past that needs to be resolved. Think about your anger from the past as synonymous with driving with the handbrakes on. It slows down the whole process. It makes the ride not pleasurable. So I would simply say that in the first part, audit yourself and see if you can understand if there is an anger in you. For some of you, it could be anger relating to how you were treated by someone. It could be related to how you were treated in a relationship. Now, for some of you, for example, your motivation for success is driven by a need to square with someone else, perhaps who hurt you, perhaps in a relationship or otherwise. So it's anger that is motivating you for success, which means your motivation is wrong. In order to let go of anger, you have to move to a place of forgiveness. The key word is forgiveness. Let go and let God and move on. You have to become indifferent to your past and whatever may have happened. Let go. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be angry. Be angry, but sin not. Sin simply means to miss the mark. To take an action that is not consistent with your potential, your purpose, or who you could be. Anger is natural. Wrath is unnatural. Avoid it if you can. Now, the second group of people are people who just for some reason were not really socialized or trained well, raised with men. I have a feeling that what we are going to see over the years to come will be an expansion and an explosion of emotions such as wrath amongst young men. Why? A lot of these young men have been feminized. They were not raised with other men. I tend to ask people, in the session I did 2 sessions ago, I said, one of the things you have to do for yourself is the importance of getting to a point of being almost a physical athlete, sports, but more specifically martial arts. I have found and I have met men who had so much anger. I used to have the same, you might say, irritation from a young age. And it was only until I started martial arts that I realized, let me give you a good example and a true story. many years ago when I was very young. I remember this particular day. Um, it was an altercation, and a girl said to me, who was a passerby, she said, well, for some reason, she had seen me in a number of altercations on other days. Now, I was just present. I wasn't committing any form of bodily harm, but I was present. And you could tell that I was present with the other people. And she said to me once, you seem to be everywhere where there is chaos or some unruly behavior or, and most importantly, some physical altercation or a very severe fight has either taken place, is taking place, or is about to take place. What is it about you that is always attracted to chaos and violence? The word is violence. You seem to be wherever there is violence. And I took stock of what she said. I reasoned. And I audited my past, and I realized, yes, there was some truth to what she had said. And I was helped so much by the fact that I was raised by a great father. In many ways, I could have got into so much more trouble, but at the back of my mind was always the fact that I didn't want to disappoint my father. Yes, I was always around where there was problem, but I wasn't necessarily, I was there to participate, put it that way, but I disciplined myself as much as possible not to be the first to start the process. But what dawned on me was that I had all this energy as a young boy, my teenage age years and going up to 18, 19, I had all this energy, but I didn't have a place and know how to channel that energy. Then I started martial arts, and I found peace. But here was the thing, and I think this is an important statement. I realized after the statement was made, there was a part of me that said, well, this is true. And there was a part of me that said, well, if this is the case, if the audit of what she said is consistent with reality, which it was, I think I should really learn how to use, or how to be in the fight game, how to use my hands, how to fight standing up and fight on the ground, but also how to use weaponry. It wasn't just a case of just angry fighting. You had to be very clever and very tactical. So I said, well, I'm going to go learn how to get into martial arts, so I know how to fight really well, so I can take people down whenever I'm in a place that requires violence. My motivation was completely wrong, was off. The day I joined, I found in the coach something that I needed, which was another role model, just like my father, who was providing me with directions and who was accepting that I had all this energy and was teaching me how to fight, but from a self-defense perspective, and started to teach me the tenets of martial arts and the codes of conduct and the importance of emotional control and the importance of using my strength to protect rather than to attack. And suddenly I started to change. I no longer was around where there was violence or unruly behavior. I was less visible. I was more introspective. Why? Because I started to regulate all those emotions. You couldn't see me react in a very, very wrathful manner because my anger was measured. I still had the emotions, but I knew how to channel it. I knew when to understand. I could see when the anger was starting to brew, and I developed methodologies to walk away. I started becoming more stoic. So one of the things I'm recommending to you is understand that as a young man, your emotions, your testosterone, your ego, your pride, your peer group will play a role, even particularly women, will play a role in whether you become successful by virtue of your ability or inability to control your emotions, particularly anger and wrath. Now, the second part of the group of people that I should talk about are people who, for whatever reason, you have an angst, you have an anger towards life, towards people, towards success. You must go through an emotional verbal masturbation when you see people who are successful. Why? Because you just feel that those who have success have done something wrong. Most people do not admire successful people. They have an angry disposition, a wrathful disposition to a success. And for that reason, they are unable to become good student, to those who are successful. You see, you cannot learn from someone you don't admire. And anger is an emotion that does not mix with admiration. Wrath is an emotion that almost guarantees that you would never learn, or you would never know how to behave in the presence of other people in such a manner that would welcome favor. Let me share one last thing before I go. Some time ago, and this was sad, I had the opportunity to meet a man, and he was doing some work for me. And on this particular occasion, he came with his son. His son must have been in his early 20s, a young man, also young enough to be my son. And in the conversation, I had set down the rules of what was supposed to be the scope of works that he would do for me. And I had one particular rule. And they started the work for me. And I'm normally very soft-spoken when I meet people. And this was the case. And for some reason, I came to inspect the works that they were doing on a site. And I noticed that they had actually not followed the rule. So I simply corrected the young lad who was with him, with his father, and said, you can't do this. Now remember, the instruction was given to the person who was supposed to be the contractor. And the son was there when it was given. But in any case, it was just a simply correction. You can't do this. And the father could not control his emotion. His response was very loud, very aggressive, and unnecessary. Especially with the fact that I said that even in good faith, very respectfully, because I knew he was a young lad, young boy, and I spoke to him as I would someone who was under my mentorship. The father's wrathful outburst was unnecessary. Just a blow, and very quickly, within a few seconds, I set him very straight. The reason for the story is as follows, and I think this might ring true for some of you. And I set him straight in a very calm manner to say, you don't do that. But I walked away thinking, because when I had met the young boy, I thought to myself, well, I'm always drawn to younger men who are starting their journey of life, but who want to be successful. And I'm always happy to pay it forward. And I said to another associate of mine, what a shame. In that split second of outburst and a wrathful demeanor and attitude, he has sabotaged his son's possible opportunity to gain favor from myself. And I'm not saying that I have so much to give, but here it was, is I over the years, a lot of the good fortune that I have had have come from people who took a liking to me. But that was partly meant by the fact that I was very teachable, and I was very courteous, very inquisitive, but also very patient, very respectful, very honoring in my manners. And here, father, because he could not control his emotion, had put me in a position where I just simply said, well, I'll just help another person. Because every time I remembered that experience, I thought to myself, well, he is his father's son. And unfortunately, favor is something that is gifted, but it's a gift that comes with honor. The father was dishonoring to me, and that meant that I couldn't extend the hand of favor that I wanted to his son. As a matter of fact, it's quite sad, because I knew that I could, in a few words, sentences, offer the son an opportunity to work both with me and my associates, which would have changed his life. Now, the reason I use that story is a simple one. Sometimes most of you will not meet success as early as you should, not because you don't deserve it, but because you haven't mastered the opportunity to control your emotions. Most of our communication is body language. The outburst of wrath is not always verbal. Sometimes it's just your body language, the way you move your head, the way you shake your head, and people are watching you. And as you move towards the echelon of success, what you tend to find is that people tend to watch more than how you behave and what you do than they listen to what you say. A reaction that is inappropriate dismisses you from the opportunity for favor. So success is not in reach for most people because you have an angry disposition and a wrathful attitude that pushes away favor and puts you in a place where you are dishonoring. Here's the key thing. The emotion of anger and wrath displaces the emotion of honor. Honor is recognizing the difference either in someone or an environment. You gift honor when you find it present. Anger clouds your judgment in such a way that you cannot stay in a place of honor or in a position of honor, and therefore it stops you from getting the favor that would have been extended by virtue of the honor that you would have given. I'll bring today's session to a close. I'll say as follows. Most people, when you think about the 7 deadly sins, most people do not think or associate themselves with any of such vices because it seems too extreme. Gluttony, pride, lust, envy, greed, wrath. These are things that most people think to themselves, it can't be me. But if you audit yourself carefully, what you find is that in many cases, the emotion and the attitude is there. It's quite subtle. And people's perception might be different to your interpretation of what you consider your actions to have been. I'll leave you as follows. Think of yourself as running a race from A to B. If you want to be successful, the first step is to know where you are. Second step, know where you're going. Third step, start moving in that direction. Fourth step, avoid obstacles in your way that could limit, hinder, or stop you from moving forward. The 7 deadly sins I've covered in this series are supposed to help you know where the obstacles will be in your life and how to avoid them. You play a game that I call the negative art of success by avoidance, not by action. Think about, as I close, we've heard, you may not be familiar with this, but you've heard of the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are split into 2 parts, what I call action and what I call passive commandments. Thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. The 7 deadly sins are supposed to be a negative art of success in that they tell you what to avoid. By virtue of the avoidance, you can get to success much quicker. Rather than focusing on what to do without looking at where you're going to, think about you driving, deciding, well, I'd like to go from A to B. I'd like to drive from London to Shrewsbury. And I want to do that in 3.5 hours. And I give you an Aston Martin, say DB9, or a Vanquish, or whichever, any one of your choice. And you decide, I'm going to drive at 160 miles an hour. Without reference to road types, speed limits, other cars, you will get into an accident. And that will stop you from getting to Shrewsbury. Whereas if you said, okay, where are the obstacles? The sat-nav says, well, this is a faster route, but be careful, there's a police camera there, and there's another one there, so adjust your speed accordingly, and most importantly, drive within the speed limit. We have identified obstacles, things to avoid. And as you drive, you're making observations of pedestrians and other cars and other things on the road that might cause you to have an accident and jeopardize the opportunity to reach your destination. If you can avoid these 7 deadly sins, success will be within reach. Now, I hope that today's session and the sessions that I have covered previously have been very useful to you. In any case, if they have, I'd like to get some feedback from you.